see. And then all right. And now we have Insta. Okay, sweet. Excellent. Well, it's fabulous to see you both. And for anyone who's watching, welcome to another. Hey, come on, run wild with us. Ask us anything. I'm Lisa Kastner. I'm here with two of our brilliant editors, authors, and whatever else they want to be, Ben White and Cecilia Kennedy. And I know we will shortly be joined by Peter Wright as well. And we are here with you on Thursdays between 5 and 6 p.m. Pacific time, 8 and 9 p.m. Eastern time. So you can just ask us whatever you want. Go ahead, put your questions into the comments section of whatever venue you may be watching us, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter. We're there, and we're happy to chat. So with that, the last time we got together, I tossed out there a question, which I know is one of those questions. It's like an aha moment. I think every creative writing author and creative writing editor encounters in their own personal journey associated with the analysis of more what I would call like narratives, that it's not a school paper, right? It's not the assessment that you're told by your English lit teacher to do of, the Count of Monte Cristo. It's how do you actually analyze writing so to make sure the narrative is the strongest that it can be, and that the writing itself, right, is the strongest that it can be. And like, what were your aha moments that you had in that journey? So with that incredibly long introduction, I'm going to punt to Cecilia, because I have a sneaking suspicion she's got some really cool insights for everyone.
Well, first of all, I mean, the thing that surprised me the most when I first started editing was how prolific everyone is. Like, I struggled to get 50,000 words in a manuscript, and my writing has gotten even shorter. But how prolific people are. So like, because I mean, my day job is copywriting, so it's sound bites. It's like these catchphrases and whatnot. And then I tend to write really small fiction, like flash fiction and microfiction. And then I did struggle to get a 55,000, maybe it's 57,000 word manuscript out now. And so when I read from authors, they're like, yeah, this is 110,000 words. Oh, I've got sequels, I've got sagas. I'm like, wow, how do people write so much? And it's amazing to see the amount of work that people put out, and I'm blown away by it. So that, first of all, is the first thing that surprised me about editing, how much people can produce. The other thing is, so my previous life was, composition professor. I, read a lot of essays, and I worked for Pearson Publishing in the Writing Center, the online writing center. So we also looked at creative work as well. But we were just supposed to identify in 30 minutes a main issue that was a major problem, like whether it's the thesis statement or topic sentences or whatever, and then two smaller issues related to grammar, maybe in 30 minutes, and write like basically a 500-word essay to the student in words that they could understand, with examples of our own, that we didn't repeat ourselves. And it was a tall order. So when I get these manuscripts, I still think along the lines of, what's the most pressing need? So what is the biggest thing that we could fix? Whether it's a structural area or it's a character that's not quite coming through, I look for the main thing that may be lacking. But also, I also read with the intention that maybe nothing is lacking. Maybe this is the way it's supposed to read, and what is the author's intention. So trying to do no harm, I guess, while you're editing. Like, what can I do that's the minimum amount that still makes this work its work? But also, if it needs a lot of structural help, what is it? What would make it better? So that's kind of how I approach a piece. What is the major thing? Because if I get caught in too many details, then I'm not seeing the whole piece. And then I can go back in and work in those other details, the line edits and whatnot. But I'm still working from that. What's the global thing that may be missing? Some manuscripts, it's not much. Some, it is. So it's balancing those things.
Got it. Ben, how about you? What was your experience?
What was the question? Just kidding. It was as a reader, I'm one of those readers who can't skim, whether I'm editing or reading for my own pleasure. I can't skim. I've got to look at every word. And when I edit, I find myself looking at every word and remembering what took place before, and then seeing the gaps of that happened. Something happened before, and now it's like it never happened. And so to link those sections of the novel together and make sure that they are fluent, there's a flow, and it's consistent. The consistency, and that goes with the storyline or the character. And if the character, well, in the novel I'm working on now, in one section, the main character found a way out of a cave by swimming down and back up on the other side of a wall. And then the next chapter, she couldn't swim at all. And that was, oh, whoops, we can't have that. We're about to lose the whole book. And so we had to go back and fix that. And sometimes with moving characters logistically from one place to another, I remember in Tom Milazzo's The Faith Machine, he had the team going to certain places in the country, but it was out of order. There was no reason for them to go from DC to Atlanta back to Kentucky. When Kentucky's on the way to Atlanta, why didn't they go there first? And he didn't even notice. He pulled out a map and said, "Yeah, you're right. Let me change that." And it didn't change. There was no reason for them to go to Atlanta first. There was no explanation. So logistically and realistically, it just didn't fit. And so those surprising things of seeing where the author may have forgotten the story and forgotten the flow of the story and the character's character.
Yeah.
I think that became a area of emphasis for me to pay attention to, because the details you don't want to get too much into the detail and have it all detail, but you don't want to have an event that is not supported by the previous details. The previous events.
I'm going through that right now too with an author where they mention a drawing or a picture, and this drawing and picture has moved all over the manuscript, so I'm familiar with it. But I'm like, wait a minute, did we mention the drawing already yet? And so because we've moved it in different spots, I'm like, I got to trace this drawing. Where is it? Where is it showing up in this manuscript? Because I can't have something appearing and referred to that wasn't earlier that referenced. So I'm doing that kind of work as well. So yeah, I mean, you really do have to wear a lot of hats, and you do have to be present every time that you read.
Yeah. And so, you talk about if it's a setting that takes place in a year, the things that the characters are doing have to be appropriate for that year, and what they have access to, and what they what they discuss and like. It has to be something that was discussed and liked in that era, because and it goes back to Cecilia's point. You don't want to make your reader mad at you or confuse them about something just showing up or not being right, because there are readers that don't skim over it and they'll catch it and they'll say, "Oh, that was that was confusing. Why am I reading this book? Let me put it away and go find something that's consistent." And that's not what we as editors want the authors to turn loose.
So, Peter, how about you? What was like the biggest surprise for you when you were jumping from a world of non-creative writing and more like what I would call like what your English teacher expected from your summer reading assessment, to jumping into more like authorial writing and editing?
Wow. Okay.
It's just I just put big words behind what we left last week with. So
I have to think about that for a moment. I do remember the very first story I wrote actually was in like third or fourth grade, and it was about, a good page long. And it's about a kid at the grocery store who was terrified of messing up the whole thing. He went into the grocery store doing mistake after mistake after mistake. And I don't know, I may have been getting in trouble at that during that time of my life. It was like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or whatever. And at the end of the story, he wakes up, and it was all a bad dream. So I mean, he did make all the mistakes in his dream, and when he woke up, he could do it for real do it right the first time. So, as far as breaking out from non-creative to creative writing, it was a process that I took to, like a natural. Everything that I learned in the programs that I went through just made sense in a way that almost like I taught myself while I was listening to the teacher reading along. I would she would say something about, well, this is like this, and I'll catch what she was saying and the gist of it in the next chapter. I was, also just a beautiful progression that just made sense to me in a way that, math kind of did for a little while, but the writing and editing just is something I see. I don't understand it. It's just something I do. And I caught the first thing Cecilia saying, that if something isn't present in the story before it's acted upon, it doesn't make sense. It's jarring for the reader. That's why you need foreshadowing. You need to put places. Even nondescript little things. There's a pen in the corner. When 2 pages later, that pen is going to sign a major document, but that pen has to be there.
Yeah.
And yes, it's significant, but at the same time, but that foreshadowing gives it a sort of a weight that you really don't, that you expect from a good book. Movies do it all the time. You have to go back and see what they call the bloopers or whatever, to see when they actually put the foreshadowing in the story, because you're so wrapped up in it that you miss those things. You catch it on third or fourth, fifth view.
Wow, cool. Yeah, I admit I stupidly thought that I was a huge nerdball. I know everyone's really surprised by that, but I was the kid that when you were assigned, like, here's the 3 major literary works that you have to that's your homework over the summer. I was like, and you have to answer these 10 questions, in essay format. I was the nerd who was like, yes, until I had to read like Animal Farm for like the 4th time, because I'm switched schools a lot when I was in elementary and middle school, and then I was like, I actually tried to debate with my English teacher and convince them not to have me do the same damn books again. And they went, no, you have to still do this. The questions will be different. And she was right. The questions were different, but still. But yeah, I ignorantly thought those analyses that, we had to do for English Lit would somehow be applicable to analyzing stories from a narrative perspective, or for like creative writing perspective, or craft. They had nothing to do with nothing associated with really analyzing a story for the story itself, or for creative writing, it was really much of it was more so, or I would argue that it was like, the analysis of why was this book significant for that period of time in American history, or, a lot of the questions I think were more so surrounded by that. And, when we're analyzing stories, other than what, like Ben had mentioned, where it's like, was there actually a rotary phone available in the 1700s? Well, the answer is no. It's we've had a couple of submissions where, and I've been a judge for different book awards in the past, where there would be a submission that it was set in like Greece, and someone had like the nickname of Dude, and I'm like, okay, let's chat, because there is no freaking way in hell someone is going to be called Dude out of Greece, during this specific period. Or the big one, and I mentioned this one before, was there was an author who used contractions within throughout the book, and there was different forms of punctuation that it just simply would not be used during that period of time, because it was like 500 BC. I'm like, dude, no. You can't, if you're choosing to do this in a first person narrative and you want this to be authentic, you cannot say ain't. Like, that is not gonna happen. Suzanne says, but didn't Ophelia call Hamlet and he left her on read? So I'm gonna say most likely not. And also considering many of the stories that are referenced by even say Shakespeare, Shakespeare was writing about periods in time in which, guess what? Most information was provided or shared verbally. It was not shared in written form. Written form actually did not become what it is today until far, or language, the consistency of language, let's put it that way, until well past many of the stories that we are, let's say, heavily encouraged to read during our schoolings. So, and it's not like it's all that hard to do the research to find this stuff out, right? I mean, especially with the proliferation of the internet. And I mean, honestly, you could just go to the friggin' library and, hit up one of their research computers, and it'll tell you pretty quickly whether you're on or off track. So, yeah, honestly, that was my first big, like, oh, this, I can't write an essay format for a short story. These are completely different structures and they have nothing to do with nothing, so that was part one. And then from there, actually, similar to Peter's experience, although I didn't walk in going, yay, I was right. I walked in going, oh my God. And I wrote books, huge notebooks full of notes from instructors, because it's like I just had never thought of it that way. I was just basically free writing. When I first started writing, I was, definitely a pantser. And I didn't realize that, so there is a huge difference between, third person close, third person omniscient, first person, and what's the importance of third person close oftentimes within the narrative structure, and who that narrator is. And I realized I just said a whole lot of stuff that I probably lost 90% of the people. So, but that's fine. but yeah, that was my big aha, was just like, oh my gosh, none of this has anything to do with anything. These are all new, not only skills, but knowledge and things to understand. So.
And I'm even thinking of like my literary analysis classes and courses that I took in graduate school. It was assumed that the author it was assumed that the text was authentic. You never questioned it. And so, there was always that idea of you analyze the work and the contents within it. You can do a cultural study, or you can do a structuralist study where the author is dead and you're just working with the material from the book. But nowadays, with conversations around authenticity, the author's not necessarily dead. Readers want to know who that author is. And they want to know that the experience on the page fits the author's experience to some extent, which is a new thing. Or at least it feels like a new thing. So when I go to read a work, when I look at characters, are they authentic? Are they well-rounded? Does it feel like this person, like I see a lot of well-meaning authors, good people who want to champion the experience of somebody who might be a person who's disabled, or people of color. And I'll go to read the manuscript and I'll think, wow, I think there's a disconnect here. This does not feel like a real person. This feels like a characterization, but it doesn't feel like a character. So I do run across that as an editor as well. So there are people who can do it, who know the experience, who live it, or do their research. And then there's a lot of cringe out there that I've been reading as well. A lot of cringe. Well-meaning, well-intentioned, but that authenticity part is very big.
Yeah, we actually, I want to say maybe 7 years ago, among the first few novels that we had accepted, one was written from, let's say the author came from a completely different perspective, in terms of cultural perspective, and said, oh, it's not a big deal. One of my best friends is of, this cultural background, and you can just hire her to do a read and she'll be fine. She'll say it's fabulous and blah, blah, blah. And I wasn't the editor for it. But I read a little bit of it and I thought, no, there's a lot of stereotyping in here. But, and that was also back when that was the thing, right? Was like, you had to hire someone to be, to basically validate that the character's experience, if you were not of that background, that the character's experience was true to that culture. And I still remember the author, her bestie calling me and saying, "Oh my God, Lisa, the book is awful. It's just full of stereotypes. I can't believe she did this." I mean, she was freaking out. Like, how do you get me out of this? Because she's one of my best friends and it's so horrid what she's doing to this. Sensitivity reader. Thank you, Suzanne. And, and I was like, oh my God, like, okay, so let's figure this out. So I like kind of talked her through, like, how do you position this so that, because, the woman who wrote it was kind of like, oh, this'll be fine. Everything's fine. She'll say it's fabulous and let's just move on. Let's keep going, And I said, okay, so I had to kind of coach the sensitivity reader on, like, how do we give her feedback so that it's palatable and you don't basically lose one of your best friends in the meantime. And and she and I worked together on that and we actually eventually ended up pulling in somebody else who did not know the author to act as a sensitivity reader, because for whatever reason, hearing the feedback from someone she didn't know, she could hear it. But when it was coming from one of her best friends, for whatever reason, she simply could not hear it. And I mean, I still think, especially if you have never experienced that culture whatsoever, right? Like, War Dogs is set in Puerto Rico, and so quite a few of the and a lot of the flashbacks are in Puerto Rico during the time of Christopher Columbus and De Leon. And so I actually asked some friends of mine who are of Puerto Rican descent. One is a first generation American, and the other is was actually technically an immigrant. And but I knew from talking to them they were still deeply in the throes of, you know, Boricua culture, right? And so I just thought, now you know, mind you, like when growing up, my elementary school and pre-elementary or kindergarten and pre-kindergarten was El Centro Comunal Borincano. So, you know, obviously, you know, I was like the only redheaded white child, you know, there, which is, you know, obvious. And again, clearly also by intent. My mother at the time was a counselor. And so she was the director of counseling for families at that community center, which is why I was there. Anyway, so I'm not familiar with it, but I also don't live and breathe it, right? So, you know, it was important to me to bring in people who, you know, live and breathe it every day to tell me if, look, you know, this is what you did here is a stereotype, right? Like this is not accurate. And you know, again, remember, stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason, because it's based in some modicum of truth. But again, it's it's an extreme of whatever that cultural, you know, blanket assessment or blanket stereotype is. Yeah. Fable. Yeah, fable. Actually, that's a great way of putting it. Thank you. So, but yeah, I mean, you know, stuff like that happens, you know, all the time. And I think, even though I just went off on a tangent, that to, you know, Cecilia's point, a lot of times, you know, as the author, you just can't see it, right? Because either you can't see it because you haven't experienced it, or you can't see it because you're too close to your own narrative, if that made sense.
Suzanne has a good question. What's more important, authorial intent or reader response, or is there a middle ground?
That is a great question. What do you guys think?
I think that we choose a work because we recognize the intent of the author and we want to maintain it. But at the same time, if there's something that would be distracting to a reader, we have to let the author know that. And at the end of the day, if it's material enough, we might try to convince them to accept that change. If it's not, we would probably advise them saying, well, you could get this as a comment in a review if you don't change it. And it's up to them at that point. So yeah, it is a balance, I guess, for me. If it's material enough where I'm just like, I don't know, I didn't see this earlier, are you willing to change? Then we need to talk about that and change it. But if it's not, if it's a little bit smaller, I still try to convince the author to change it. But if not, remind them that it could come up in the comments if you don't.
Right. Got it. How about you, Peter? What do you think?
I agree with Cecilia. The authorial intent of the stories I've edited, the books, it's I understand that it's there, but when they're creating a work of fiction, and I see something that's glaringly odd or out of place, and like I mentioned it to them, like this doesn't really compute the way this is trying to make this look like, and then they go, look, we did in the end. They go, but that's the way it happened. And I'm like, well, then it's not a story. Then it's an article. It's an essay kind of thing. We're writing stories. We're creating fiction. We need to make the reader. We need to bridge the gap between our imagination or the author's imagination and what the reader is getting out of the story. And a good author will allow the reader or enable the reader to get stuff out of their stories that they didn't know they put in there, that they can read into something and glean something more from the story that the author didn't really intend to put in there. So I think it's a nice balance or a blend of the two points of view, two aims.
And also a good author would be able to explain clearly to an editor, okay, this was my intent because, not this is my intent, don't change it, but this is what I wanted to do structurally, or this is what I wanted people to feel, or this is why, and then often I can see it and I'll be like, all right, I'm ready to defend you. Or if I still don't see it, hey, what do we do to maintain this? It's always a conversation as well. I mean, if I want to reject something, and the author just says, no, you can't, it's not my intention, I want to know why. I want to know why the author wants to maintain that. What are you trying to achieve? And if I'm not getting that, that's hard to figure out, because you are still thinking of the reader.
Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, it's. I find sometimes the author doesn't know that the response is what it is because there was no intent, and the editor's role then is to point that out and say, do you realize that this is really kind of subtle and funny, and they'll say, oh no, I didn't see that at all. Or I just edited a line of describing the actions of a soldier who it's in present tense. So he scratches his balls and cocks his head. And I asked the author, do you want balls and cocks in the same sentence? And she said, oh, no, that's not what I meant at all. But you've just taken your reader response down a place you don't want them to go. And it doesn't work because it's a distraction. There was another line where, not in the same book, but in another book where the action was the speaker was feeling old, and then a car came rolling over the hill, which is very nice because you're getting old and the car rolling over the hill. It's over the hill, but the author didn't have that intent, didn't even catch it, but the reader will.
Yeah,
and so
that's kind of fun. I'd leave it.
Yeah. Oh, we left that one. Yeah. We changed the other one.
Yeah.
But,
the other one maybe.
That one we left because I said, this fits your narrative because it's subtle, but it's still it's funny, and you can say, well, yeah, I always meant for that to happen. You can just, yes, I did. That's the way I write, and take credit for it. But I think the author is going to see the work in a certain way that is based on what their experience was to write it. And if the reader doesn't necessarily have that response, does the author care? And you bought the book anyway, so that's what we wanted. But or if the author speaks about it in a way that moves beyond the author's intent, is that more valuable than the reader's response falling short of the author's intent? And I think there's layers of readers that you don't want to try to write for one of those extremes of the reader. You want to let the reader's response be the reader's response because they're individuals, and your intent is your intent, and that's what you can defend no matter where. I I remember we used to have to do deep readings, going back to the classroom experience, the deep readings of work. And I got assigned to Gertrude Stein. It was one line. And in typical Gertrude Stein fashion, it was one line. I don't remember what it was. But my deep reading of it was a response that took me 2.5 pages to respond to it. And I knew it was time for me to graduate at that point. I said, take the pebble from their hand and go, grasshopper, just go. But it's so there. I think there's you want to have the theme there for the intent to the response. But if the response falls short or it goes past it, then great. It's like Vonnegut's line about Slaughterhouse-Five. They still read that?
Yeah.
And yes, they do, and they still respond to it. But his intent was maybe not that.
You know, it's funny. I by the way, Suzanne, I love that question. Like, what's more important, the authorial intent versus the reader response? I'm going to go back to one of Ben's earlier responses. You know, if it takes the author out of the story and they put the book down, then guess what? That's a fail, right? So, you know, that's really what it comes down to. If and also to like what Cecilia had mentioned before, can the author justify or back up rather what they were doing, right? Like if you point out, hey, you have them scratching their balls and cocking their head. Is this what you meant? Like, do you understand what this is
saying? Somebody else did it, so I can too.
Right.
It's not
or just going
to solve the problem.
Yeah, and by the way, you know, this is like a young adult, you know, commercial fiction piece. I'm thinking you probably did not intend that, so you may not want to have it actually in the story, right? So when we say, you know, can you justify it? It doesn't mean, you know, can you provide that more like essay analysis of why that's within the story. It's just more like, well, this was my intention of, you know, having the character, you know, going over the hill and then literally going over a hill, right? Or saying like, well, oh, it wasn't my intention, but hey, that's pretty cool, right? It reinforces that key milestone within the narrative that actually enriches that visual for the reader. So it's that, yes. So the answer is yes, there is a middle ground. And oftentimes the middle ground exists somewhere between what the author intended and what they didn't intend at all. So.
Yeah, I had a really good editor for a short fiction piece that I wrote. And he was helping me, you know, with the ending a little bit. I loved his suggestions. And then at the end, he goes, oh, you're beginning. Let's start with what actually happened first. And he moved, you know, the first thing chronologically up there before my opening line. And I said, no, this piece is organized spatially. So it's a visual organization. And so he got it after that. So I was able to articulate, this is how I intended to organize it. And this is why it has to come after. And then he was like, oh, got it. I actually see that now. So, I mean, there are ways to, I mean, I don't know about the balls and all of that stuff, you know, what you would do to defend that. But yeah, I would do, but I was able to say, yeah, in this piece, it's visually, it's spatially organized. So yeah, sometimes there's a good reason. Sometimes there just isn't one. Yeah, I can't defend that. We need to take it out, you know?
Well, the intention's there. That's the point. Because you have a reason to create a desired effect with your reader. So it's not just happenstance like, oh, well, let's just try it this way. No, you did it for a reason, and that's the way you want the book laid out.
And it goes back to the, does it work? Or are you just giving this suggestion because you're like, I like chronology. Like, okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's a time and a place to tell a story in chronological order, but I just didn't in this case. I began with an image that came up at the end, and I'm like, no, I really want to begin with that image. It's spatially organized. So he goes, yeah, well, I get it. He was a good editor. I really liked him. That was the only that was the only thing that I was like, yeah, no, can we not do that? But yeah.
Now, out of curiosity, did he fight you on it, or was he like, oh, okay, I get that?
He said, I get it. He said, I totally get it. I see it. Yeah. And it was nominated for a Pushcart.
Woohoo!
So really
nice.
Cool. Yeah.
Very cool.
He was really good. It was actually a team. It was a group of people at a literary magazine, and they were really awesome. They were super nice to work with.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother. So, actually, so that opens the door for another question. So, what was your best experience as a writer? Since I know all of us here are both writers and editors, as a writer, and what made that experience work so well?
I think the first.
I love the dead silence.
Yeah, I couldn't stand it. But, the awkward silence. But there was an editor who was working on it was an ebook, The Kill Gene, and he was working on it, and he discovered something that I already knew, and he flagged it as the writing wasn't up to par, and I knew it, and he caught it, and that was rewarding to have someone say, "You got to fix this," and since I did, since I knew it, I said, "Yeah, you're right. I got to fix that. Thanks for catching it." But or validating what I already knew. I think that's a good approach for an editor to point out, and many times the writer will know, the author will know, and where the writing gets lazy, or in poetry it's easy because it gets too long and you don't even like reading it. Read it out loud. If you don't like to hear it, then something's wrong with it, and you can add more energy by taking stuff out. But that was the experience with the editor that jumped up the most there. To know he knew the intent. Go back to the intent. He knew what I was trying to do, but it just wasn't doing it, and it was based on the writing. The writing wasn't doing it. The event itself was worth telling, but the telling needed to be better.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Actually.
I had a story that was 3 paragraphs long, and a literary magazine accepted it, and the editor there said, "Okay, I'm going to make some changes," and she's like, "Just go with it." I'm like, "Okay." What's going to happen? She goes, "I will accept this if you get rid of the first paragraph and the last paragraph and keep the middle." I was like, "What?"
Oh, okay.
And she goes, "Because the middle's your story." And I was like, wow. So it was a 1 paragraph. I hadn't seen that paragraph could be a story. And it was a full arc.
Oh, wow, cool.
I loved my first paragraph. I loved my ending paragraph. I loved the story that I wrote. But she saw something else. And she's like, yeah, get rid of those. This is your story. And I was like, cool. I mean, it opened my mind up to what a story can be. Sometimes it's in the middle of your story that you planned, and it changed the intention to some degree. It really did, but I saw it, and I saw that it was really cool. So I was like, yeah, go for it. And I don't think that would always work, but I was open to it, and I just thought, that's pretty cool. So now I could take those other 2 parts of the story, I guess, and fuse them together, and or send out 2 different stories for that one. But
why not?
It's a trilogy.
Seriously,
It's a
"Yeah,
trilogy.
you have to get rid of all of this or we're not going to publish it." And I was like, well, I mean, I could just not publish it, but I was like, I kind of really like this magazine. I like her. And I'm like, you know what? I actually see it. So I was like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Peter, how about you?
Well, when I was working with my editors, they were going through what I'd written, and they go, "There's not much that needs to be fixed here." And I'm like, "Well, that sounds good because I've been working on it pretty hard." But she kept pointing out the same thing in several different paragraphs. Like, you keep missing this here, you keep missing this here. It was the same exact mistake, and I thought I was sailing through, and my grammar, my punctuation was perfect. But from an outsider's point of view, it's made the reader stumble. So I was able to take a step back and listen to go, okay, why is they keep saying that, and what's wrong with this picture? And I cleaned up the issues and fixed the mistakes, and the story just flowed. That was better. Flowed. I couldn't get past flew. It flew. So listening to the editor is something that I tell my readers or tell my authors, like, I'm not trying to break anything. I'm just trying to ask questions and point out things that you might have missed. Just listen to your editor, because we're not doing this for vanity. We're not doing this for our sake. We're doing it for the author's sake, to make their work better. So put your ego on the table or in a drawer, close it, and let's get to work on your book.
Wow. Yeah, I'd say kind of similar to Ben. I think my best experience, I mean, I don't know that I've had a bad per se experience with an editor. I mean, I've had some horrid experiences in like workshops or like at conference, where, a lot of beginning writers tend to like project onto those that they're those works that they're assessing. So like I saw there was this one guy who his writing, I mean, prolific, huge, long sentences, but there was like no flow, but he loved things like gardening. And so it was just ripe. Get it?
Yeah.
With
intentional.
I love it.
With all this like forestry description and so on. And so he just ripped apart my submission, and this was actually in my in the MFA program I was in, and he was a fellow student. And the way he positioned it was like, you have to do this. And I was like, but I don't write like you. And I'm not you. So this is illogical, which, by the way, never say anything like, this is illogical to anyone ever, because they don't care. But I want to say, at least all the experiences I remember, I'll put it that way. A lot of times the editor would come forward with suggestions that, like, I knew that was the weakest part of the story. Like, either I consciously knew it, or like when I was revising it, I stumbled on that portion, and either I questioned to myself, like, should I change this? And actually, Ben, who's my editor for War Dogs, I tossed him two questions, which I'm sure he's going to completely regret ever having volunteering to be my editor for it. But like, one of them is like, should I elaborate on the description of the secret chamber of the king and queen of Spain during the time of Christopher Columbus? And the reason that I still have that internal dialogue is because, like, you never really go back there, right? Like, it has to be within the context of the story. It has to be set in that location, but it's not like, you're landing on the islands of Puerto Rico, right? Or it's not like, one of the 3 ships of Christopher Columbus, right? You don't need that prolific description necessarily, but would it that, you know, for me, like, that was the big question, like, would that cause a pause, like too long of a pause within the narrative for the reader to really be engaged? So it's like having those kinds of conversations with your editor. I think that I think we've all commented on, you know, and having an editor who's willing to have that conversation, right? And who's willing to call out, you know, did you ever think about this or this, right? And you know, like, actually for Cure, Peter quite kindly read portions of it, and he was like, okay, look, thematically, you really need to have more descriptions on these key points because they are key points. And I was like, God damn it, he's right. And it quickly went from like a 60,000 word book to like a 90,000 word book. Let's just put it that way. So, you know, it's I think it's not just having a good editor, but being open to having a good editor, right? Which I think a lot of times is really, really, really hard, especially for a new writer. So,
and that's a whole discussion on the value of an obscure reference. And if you want the reader response to be curious, you don't need to explain it. Just make it interesting enough to go look it up. And because it's obscure, they're not familiar with the secret chamber or that word or that place or that character. And if the response that you're going for is to invoke the curiosity, then make it curious, make it mysterious enough to pique some interest in it. If it's just a scene in a story that really, it's there and it's historical, it fits the storyline, but if you don't have curiosity about it, that's fine with me, because it doesn't impact the story in the long run. And so right. I think it goes back to the great question Suzanne had: is it the authorial intent to invoke that curiosity, or is that just a extra bonus, an unexpected bonus, a lagniappe? Look that word up. But
you know, I'm going to now, right?
Yeah, LAGNIAPPE, lagniappe.
Yep, exactly.
The unexpected bonus. But you know, we think about obscure references all the time, and especially when you're writing. Let's say, take military writing for instance. There's a lot of things in the military that are said that nobody's going to get because it's part of that culture. And so we're back in the culture and the representation of the culture, and it changes. The discussions I had with Nobody Effing Important for that book, his experience was not my experience 20 years before, because the organizational culture had changed. So you have to keep an eye on that as well.
Actually, that's an excellent point.
Yeah. And the obscure reference, it's a great tool, and you can make it work to your benefit, or you can just leave it alone. And if you're curious about it, look it up. If that's the kind of reader you are, go ahead and look it up. I don't mind.
Well, I mean, honestly, there are entire brands that made themselves by being lagniappes, right? By being that little bit of a bonus, a little bit of a gift to a readers who went, oh, wow, that's kind of cool. Let me look up Winnie the Pooh, right? And then it's like, oh my God, I love Winnie, right? And then, you know, it just would go off. And like I was actually referencing this earlier. I binge watched Wednesday, the series that's an expansion of Tim Burton's stories. And there's a scene with Uncle Fester where he makes out with one of the women who works in the cafeteria of the insane asylum. And in the background, they are playing Foreigners, I Want to Know What Love Is, right? And I will make you a bet that like 1 million people must have looked up I Want to Know What Love Is because the irony and the hilarity of that overlapping song, overlapping that scene. It was like, oh my God, this needs to be made into a music video. Like, it is just too damn funny. So anyway, Suzanne says, I love an obscure reference. You know what? I do too. Actually, and I am classic for the, I'll say something and then later on realize like, oops, like as it's coming out my mouth, I'm like, oh, wow, that was naughty. Okay, wait, let me try again. Oops, nope, that was worse. All right. When I was a kid, I would just keep trying because I'm like, no, I didn't mean cock. I meant sting. Oh wait, no, I didn't mean that either. No, I meant and then eventually, usually one of my friends would jump in and just go, just ignore her because clearly she has issues. And I was like, yeah, that's it. I just have issues and I'm going to run away. So. My gosh, we only have like 4 minutes left. Anything else, guys? Anyone watching? Cecilia, Peter, Ben, anything that you'd love us to like chat about?
Well, I will go back to touch on Shakespeare because I heard the other day that going to school in Shakespeare's time was easier because you didn't have to study Shakespeare. I couldn't argue.
Well, I mean, yeah. Same with Tolkien. Like, there's a reason. and there's some things you read for, maniacal purposes. Like, I read Tolkien because I had the hots for some guy. I was like, I don't know, 13 years old or something. And he was like a junior in high school. And wow. I was like, hot, and I always went for musicians. Big shock. My husband's a musician, but, and so I was just like, hot damn. Yeah, I'll read this. And oh my God, it was so painful to like, but I mean, he was like, well, at first he thought it was cool that I read Tolkien. And then it was kind of like, okay, now I'm done with you, because, like whatever.
But you had to study Chaucer.
But you had to study Chaucer. Yeah, exactly. I had to study Chaucer.
Every generation has their pain. I get it.
Exactly. Wow. Anything else, guys? Well, honestly, we've got all of like 2 minutes left. So again, I want to thank everyone for such an amazing and incredible active conversation. Such great questions, such amazing topics. And don't forget, we are here on Thursdays between 5 and 6 p.m. Pacific time, 8 and 9 p.m. Eastern time. And if you join and you're like, where the hell are they? This is just a recording. That's okay. You're allowed to do that. Because guess what? We actually do go back and check for any kind of additional questions that might come up on our days off, air quotes. So with that, yet again, thank you, everyone. Love you guys. And looking forward to seeing you join us next week. And don't forget, even if you don't come up with a question before then, come prepared with some killer questions, because we clearly take weird questions like, around sentences like, he scratched his balls and cocked his head. I mean, who does that?
Yes, leave us with homework. We like homework.
We like homework.
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And then
Maybe
we'll
not
completely
that kind of
forget
homework
about it.
exactly, but the homework.
We'll completely forget about it until the following week. And then all of us will act like, you said what? Why would you do that? So, but all good. All good. Excellent. All right. Thank you guys. Have an amazing week.
Bye-bye.